think would be to get a book. And this is much easier than it was when Frank and I did it at first. But then the book becomes the calling card. So if you're sitting next to me on an airplane, probably toward the end of the trip, but somewhere on that trip, you're getting a copy of my book. And I don't give it to them at the beginning of the trip because I don't want them to feel obligated to look like they're reading it, but I want to leave it as my business card. And they throw away a business card, they're probably not going to throw away a book. But it establishes a lot of credibility. And then I think the third thing that I would recommend for speakers is when people come up to you and say, boy, that was terrific, instead of just saying thank you, I think it's better to say thank you. What did you like especially? And then you get an instant evaluation from a fan that's going to tell you what spoke to them. And then you can make a mental note of that. So, for example, I'm going to Romania later today. I'm going to Romania to do 4 days in Romania speaking there. And the person who hired me, she hired me last year. I was there last year as well. She said, we're looking forward to more of your magic. Now, she's never used that word before. So when I see her tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to say, thanks for your email. You said looking forward to your magic. What did you mean by that? Now, I think I know what she means, but I really don't know what she means. So if I find out, I get to engage her in conversation and find out more about what she wants. And maybe the fourth thing is I don't say no too often unless it's way out of my league. If they say, can you adapt this? Can you do this? We have a special group. Is it okay if we do this? I try to be saying yes as much as I can. But then I always interview or seek input from my audiences before I talk. So if I'm talking to 50 doctors next week, I send out 50 emails through the client that asks them 3 questions. I usually get about 60% of them back, and that gives me a key to kind of what's particular about that group. So they're going to get pretty much the same content that the last group got if it's the same presentation, but my side comments will relate specifically to Temple University faculty or to University of Chicago.
And what are the 3 questions?
The 3 questions are, tell me about your work. If I followed you around all day, what would I see you doing? The most challenging part of your work, especially lately. And then the third question is, knowing the topic that we're going to talk about, what do you think the other people who are coming, your colleagues, need to know about this topic? That's usually where I get the best information, is that one. Because they like to talk about what other people should know.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but that's when you kind of find out, our system is a mess, leadership isn't very good, I promise that it's confidential, so it's just an email to them, and then they send the emails back directly to me. And that's very helpful, and I read those then on the plane ride out and the night before, so it's fresh in my mind, and that's been very, very helpful in building the business. And then another idea that I do that I would recommend to everybody is after you give the talk, I send a gift to the administrative assistant of the person who hired me. I don't send it to the person. I want him to be happy that she got flowers or got an orchid or got Chicago popcorn or something like that. And then I call, then I usually say when I'm there, is it okay, I might have some ideas for you. Is it okay if we talk next week? And they set me up for a call, and then I usually say, I had one additional idea that might be, I'm just throwing this out having met your people. And then I give them a real idea and say, if I can be of any help, please let me know in the future. And then that person's sort of on my tickler list. If I'm in that town, if I'm near that town, if I don't have anything to do someday, I'll fly out and have lunch with them. And that sort of builds the relationships over time. So
yeah, that's great. Okay.
Yeah, it works great.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so talking about speaking delivery. If you think of, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 would be a phenomenal speaker, who would your 10 be?
I like a local woman here that I also teach with. Char Wentz is her name, W-E-N-C. She gets amazing reviews. I've seen her probably 30 times. She's not well known in NSA, but when I need a substitute teacher at Loyola and I invite her in to sub for me, I get better ratings when she's taught for me than when she hasn't. So the reason I like her is she really does have a kind of magical connection to the audience. The other person is deceased. His name is Greg Risberg. Again, not well known outside of the Illinois NSA. He was a humorous speaker. Actually, he died 5 minutes before he was going to give one of his talks.
Wow.
Yeah, right. They couldn't find him. He went out to his car. He said, "I'm just have to get something out of the car," and they found him dead in the car.
Wow.
Terrific guy, very wonderful, really a very, very good presenter in terms of, and he did pretty much the same talk. So like I saw him 14 or 15 times over his career. I knew the joke that he was setting up, and I knew what the punchline was, and I still laughed.
Huh.
So he just had this marvelous. He was congruent. You know, he was. What you saw on the stage is exactly what he was like off the stage. He was really terrific. In terms of sort of polish, I used to like Nito a lot, and when he was kind of not president of the university, but when he was doing his presentations.
Yep. So
and then Susie Humphreys, I like her very much.
Okay.
It's in Texas.
And so then on that scale, if let's say Nito would be a 10 back in the day, how would you rate your delivery?
Well, I think I'm a 10 with my audience. I think Nito could be a 10 with kind of any audience, and I think I can be a 10 with my audience, but not any audience. And so, and part of my presentation style is facilitation and interaction. So within 10 minutes of starting, people are broken up into groups of 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah, I saw that.
Interacting with one another.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of my winning formula. That's my specialty. If I give a 20-minute talk, they're still going to be broken up into groups. So I never forget to interact. In fact, if I ever don't have them interact, I don't feel I do as well, and I'm not sure they think it's done as well either.
Yeah, isn't that terrible that they like us more when we talk less?
Yeah, right. I mean, and then they come up to you afterwards and say that was a great talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Very confusing.
I think the old method of stand up, talk, they'll remember, or stand up, entertain. I think that's like, Chinese food. You get hungry pretty soon. And I think it's much more meaningful when there's interaction. If I don't do that, Kendra Hall, she did the storytelling presentation at the last NSA.
Yeah, I saw her.
And she said, I think she said something like, don't sacrifice the story because you feel like you have to push more content. Don't get nervous and say, well, the first thing I ought to cut probably if I am limited on time are the stories. And so when I get limited on time, I have to remind myself, don't cut the interaction. That's where magic is going to happen for them. So that's my specialty. Now, if I was in a speech contest up against Nito or up against Shar or up against Greg Risberg, I don't think I would be rated a 10 in comparison to them.
I gotcha. I'm 100% with you. Okay, but however, would you say this formula of interaction works better for training and workshops than it does for keynotes?
No, I think it works. I think it can work in all formats, and we should do it because I think it has a lasting, memorable thing. I think one of the dangers that I see with NSA speakers who are considered to be sort of the mentors and all that stuff is they get wrapped up in their own stuff, and the older they get, the more arrogant sometimes we can get, and the talk becomes it's a good talk, it's funny, it's practiced, all that kind of stuff, but it's not really intimate with the audience. And so then at that point, you could be at a movie and they could be listening to you. But I think the intimacy with the audience is a huge component. And so, for example, there's a lot of studies now they're doing with for physicians and for leaders that a high rating that people put for leaders that impresses them a lot is humility. And C.S. Lewis said, humility is just thinking of yourself less.
Oh, I'm sorry, tell me that again.
Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and so I think a danger that speakers make, both beginning, middle, and end speakers, is they get really impressed with themselves instead of allowing themselves to be impressed by the audience. And if they can be impressed by the audience, that's when the handshake happens. That's the relationship that can happen. And I think that's why the people that I talked about, especially Shar and Greg, he knew how and she knows how to really make that audience feel like you are the one and only thing in my life right now. You're not just another gig. You're not just another town. And I think that's what I strive to do, both at the university and I tell my students that in the counseling program at the university, I said the class you're taking now in human relation skills is the most important class you're going to take in your entire master's program. And they laugh, and I don't, and I say I really mean that. I said if you master these skills, you and I will be impacting generations of families to come. And I really mean that, and I say it with conviction, and I really think about it when I'm with my doctors. So, and I think, the reason I do that is because I don't want to go in there thinking, this is my 3,000th talk, and I got this nailed, and this is great money and all that stuff, because I think that's when we start going down a very, very steep slope. And that's when I think people get arrogant, or they start making in-jokes at the NSA convention and the platform, and, it's sort of, for example, a couple of years ago at NSA, they had that newcomers, first-timers session.
Yeah.
And one of the things was the guy said, now here's some people you should know if you're going to be a member of NSA. And they listed Nito and Robert Henry from before, and, all these people that are the big names. And I thought, the most important person they should know is the one next to them. That's their buddy. That's the one they're going to be seeing in the hallways. They'll find mentors. They'll find somebody that will impress them. We don't need to tell them who the stars are, but they do need to feel a connection with one another. And so that's my goal when I give presentations.
Very good. Let me just see here. So, what have you done to perfect your delivery? Speaking coach or?
When I get a chance to have another speaker in the audience, I ask them to give me what they really liked that I did, what seemed to work for the audience. I ask them to watch the audience, what they really liked, and what they would recommend that I might do a little differently. And so I have somebody that does that probably 4 or 5 times a year for me. And then occasionally, if I occasionally see a professional speaker in the audience with me, I'll ask them, and sometimes they ask me. So they'll say, "Hey, can you take some notes?" And even if they don't ask me, I try to take notes anyway, and I mostly concentrate on here's what I really liked about what you did, and here's something that I noticed the audience might appreciate next time. I don't so much tell them what I think they did wrong, but I think they can kind of work from their strengths. The other thing is I've written with Cindy Maxey. I've written 4 books on presentation skills, and that has helped me sort of think about and talk to people about What do they do? I try to attend a lot of places. I have to get continuing education for my certifications and stuff. So it's hard to go to a presentation and not be thinking about how would I have done that? What would be a good way to do that? And then the other thing is I'm always I listen to feedback, but I don't listen to all feedback. They used to tell us a long time ago, throw the top 10% of your evaluations out because those people are going to love you even if you're terrible, and throw the bottom 10% out because they're going to hate you for personal reasons. But take a look at the middle, and then when you take a look at the middle, take a look at it and say, that probably is something I could do something about. And I've noticed that when I get evaluations, that's been a useful technique as well to kind of get better and better.
Okay, all right, so moving on to content expertise. On a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 would be, let's say, Peter Drucker in management or Deming in quality, how would you rate your content expertise in your field?
I have a lot of content expertise in terms of how mostly my group, physician executives, can go beyond their technical and medical training to be more engaging, either in terms of emotional intelligence, organizational intelligence, interpersonal intelligence with their teams, as opposed to just delivering information or telling people what to do, which is what they sometimes want to do when they get into leadership. So the expertise revolves around that. It's also what I teach at Loyola. It's also what I've written books about. So it's also what I do on airplanes. So it kind of has this consistency.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your content expertise if 10 is a Drucker?
Well, in my field, for what I do, I would rate myself a 10.
Okay.
Probably 9 or 10. And my specific specialty is the psychology of Alfred Adler as applied to leadership and interpersonal skills.
Okay, all right. Let me just see here. So have you done original research in your field, like best practice interviews, survey research? If 1 would be no research and 10 would be years of formal original research, how would you rate your research?
Well, the research I do is probably the most research is devoted to the books that Cindy, Maxie, and I have written, and those are all based on interviews and consulting that we've done with professionals who hire us and who we want to have hire us. So those were all done. Those would not meet, for example, though, the standard of a university research project. I don't do that. And the other research I do is, again, informal, but it's constant and ongoing. When I'm on an airplane every week, so I'm usually sitting next to somebody, and I always ask them, "Are you going home?" Because they're either going home or they're not going home. And then with a question or two, you can find out what they do for a living. And then my goal is for that conversation, however long it is or short, is to find out what they do for a living and how they got there and what was involved in that. So that's my personal ongoing research to find out what are some of the keys that people have in terms of their work life. And it doesn't make a difference if they're an executive to me. They could be anybody. But I ask them about their strengths, what they think they could do more of, and people like talking about that stuff. So I think my main way of doing research is through interviewing, either for a project like a book, we're starting one now for a blog, and I think then my sort of insatiable curiosity about people that I usually run into on airplanes and airports and stuff.
And so you would say about your original research, would you say it's a 9, it's an 8, it's a 10?
Well, in terms of if you put it under original research, then I would make it a 9. I think if you match it up to the standard that an academician would, then it's probably off the scale. It's nothing.
No. It's first of all, it's not nothing, and I would say even on the academic scale, it's high.
Okay.
Okay, so I do.
The other thing I do is I advise physicians on their resumes and interviewing practices when they're getting jobs. We've done about 125 doctors and with their resumes and getting them ready for job interviews, and that's very enlightening. So that falls into that interview space as well. And then the other thing I do, this probably might not fall into the purview of you, but I work for the Archdiocese of Chicago, so I'm a court expert for the marriage tribunal. When Catholics get divorced and they want to get married again, they have to have their first marriage annulled by the church.
Of course you do. Is there anything else that you do? I mean, is there anything you don't do? Like what does your wife think you don't do?
That's right. She's busier than I am.
Oh my gosh!
She's got her law degree at age 65.
Oh my! I bet you don't mow your lawn really well. Okay, hold on. Let me go on.
Alonzo does a great job with my lawn.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Let me just see here. Okay. So now this is essentially. Oh wait. Hold on. One more, and then we get to that. Yeah. How important was your book or books to your success in the speaking business? If 1 is nothing and 10 is could not have done it without the book.
Yeah, I would say 10.
Okay.
I would not have gotten a lot of work if I had not done the book. And yeah, I mean that was huge, and it's still huge.
But what's interesting, Kevin, is that you're the first person that's done the book the way. I mean, it's brilliant actually to interview your potential customers. That is that is like total brilliance. So that is really good.
Well, here's 2 things on that. One is, and I'd recommend this to new speakers. Nito said a long time. I was part of Nito's group for about 12 years, and Nito said a long time ago, don't write the book to be a bestseller, and don't write the book for a lot of people. Write the book for one person that you want to have hire you. So only write for that one person. So in my books, I wrote it for the one person, and I did.
Wait, did I lose you?
Are you there?
Are you there?
Hear me okay?
Hey, wait, I lost that. You said you write the book for the one person.
Write the book for one person who you want to have hire you. A real person. So when we wrote when I put my dedication in, I didn't say, my family and my loving wife. I said to Tim McNamara, Ken Johnson. So the people that I wanted to have hire me, or who hired me once or twice, or who had a big impact on my career. And I thought to myself, okay, Tim is reading this book. What does he need to know? Because there's a lot of Tims in the world. One of my students was a disc jockey in Chicago. Her stage name was Portia Stevens, and she worked on Love FM at night. And I said, how many people listen to you? She said, about 350,000. I said, wow, how do you talk to 350,000? She said, oh, no. She said, when I'm looking at the microphone, I'm thinking of one person. And every one of the 350,000 think they're the one person.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I remember.
One thing.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
The second thing I learned from John Molitor, and we learned this doing our last 2 books. What we did was we brainstormed a bunch of chapters, just titles, and then we sent it out to about 10 or 15 people each. And we said, if you were going to read this chapter, what questions would you have? And everybody wrote back to us 20 or 30 questions per chapter. So we never got stalled in writing. All we had to do was answer questions. And we knew exactly what our readers wanted to know. Then we sent it to an editor, and they cleaned it all up. And I think we wrote one of our books in 2 months. We wrote another book in 4 months. It was just a piece of cake. You don't get writer's block. My sister's a writer. She's written about 80 books. That's what she does full time. But she writes every single day, even if she has nothing to write about. So she's 4 hours a day, every morning, just writes. And I don't have the discipline or the luxury of that. But my books are different because I want it targeted for that one person. And so those 2 pieces of advice have just been fantastic in terms of the book. And it's probably also true in terms of the writing and all that sort of stuff. So, I wrote chapters for one of my courses. We didn't like the textbook, so we just kind of did our own. But I was thinking of one student when I was writing that.
That's great.
And of course, every student thinks they're that student, which is fine. I don't want them to think that way.
Okay, so let me move on to the heart of the interview, which is I'm looking at a graph. On the horizontal axis, there are years from 1 to 20, and on the vertical axis, it's gross speaking revenue. And if we think of, I guess it would be, let's say, 1983. If 1983, I wonder if you can remember any of these, what approximately was your gross speaking revenue?
Well, I think, let's see, so...
That's when you...
Oh, that's when I started, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and that does not include the practice and all that stuff, I think that was probably in the $50,000 range.
Okay, and then in 84?
One thing I do know, I don't have the figures in front of me, every year was more, probably by an increment of 10 or 15%, until we get to 9/11. And then the income jumped. By the time I was probably in the late 90s, I would think that I was in the 300,000 range, or 350. And then after 9/11, I was in the 900,000.
Wow. And so what happened from like whatever that was? So 2000 from 2000 to 2001 to go from 300 to 900. What happened?
That was when the book was laying on the guy's desk, and somebody said, "What's this?" And he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I know that guy." He said, "You might want to read that book." He said, and maybe he could help us with this project. So they had a project. It was a pharmaceutical company, and they were doing training regional medical liaisons to talk to doctors. And so I was doing some of that training. And then at one point, we were sitting around a table with those people, and I was sitting around a table with those people, and one of them said to me, I wish we could, they were talking about doing advisory boards. This is when you invite doctors in for a day,
Yep.
show the drug to the doctor, blah, blah, blah. So one of them said to me, "I wish we could clone you." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because we're doing 35 ad boards between now and December around the country." He said, "It'd be nice if we had a coach at each one." And I said, luckily, "Well, it is Kevin O'Connor and Associates, you know." And he said, "You've got associates?" I said, "I'm insulted. Why would I not have associates?" He said, "I'm sorry." And after that night, after I made 10 phone calls, I had 10 associates. So I called my NSA buddies and said, "Here's the deal. I'll train you. I'll tell you what to do. But basically what we'll be doing is we'll be going all over the United States for the next so many weekends to provide on-the-spot coaching for the pharmaceutical companies, medical science liaisons who are going to be speaking to doctors." So every Friday night, everybody would call each other. This is back when pharmacy companies spent a lot of money on these things. And everybody would compare hotels with each other on Friday night.
Yeah.
And so that consulting plus the consulting that I had already been doing was very, very, it was deep. It was in-depth kind of consulting. And then as people do in the pharmacy company, they leave companies pretty easily and go to another company. And so then what happens is so-and-so left, got a job somewhere else, and said, "Can you come to the new company with me?" So that became a big, my consulting practice probably at that time was bigger than the speaking that I was doing, although I was speaking at the consulting. So, but it was chunks of consulting time and consulting money at that time. So.
Okay. So what was the value? So from that book referral, what was the value of that next contract that the person gave you?
Well, I think I think each of those contracts was between $250 and $5, depending on the year and the time. Sometimes it was spread out over a year and a half, but that's what it taught me then. That actually, I stopped selling the book at that point. I was selling in the back of the room, stuff like that, and I thought, this is ridiculous. There's a better use for this book than trying to get $10 here and $20 there. So I never sell my books. They always are. They're my calling cards. So I think that's when I understood the book is worth more money than what's the price on the cover. And so I think that's when